And we're on, I think. Yes, there it is. The little red light. I can never get used to it. But we're on. This is 3 yards per carry. I'm Alfredo Artiaga. Simon Clancy is here. Chris Kaufman is here. And as always, we are brought to you by Pain. That should just be the name of the podcast from now on. Let's just call it the Pain Podcast. But the Dolphins kicked off their season, unfortunately, and it's been just pain for 6 weeks. But if you're experiencing any pain, car accident, slip or fall, 305-800-PAIN is who you should call. Better Business Bureau, accredited with an A+ rating, your car accident personal injury specialist. Fast connections with trusted doctors and attorneys, always ready to take your call 24/7. Again, 305-800-PAIN. 305-800-PAIN. And of course, I'd like to welcome again to the show Thompson Cigar. Just go to thompsoncigar.com and use the promo code 3 yards per carry. It's the name of the podcast. The number 3 yards per carry. And you get a special discount dedicated just for our listeners and members on our Discord. All right. I want to start with you, Chris, so we could take a I don't know if fans want to hear it as a as a victory lap, but whoever hears that preview podcast and goes all the way to the end, and God knows that podcast was an absolute mess. Although I made it sound beautiful.
It was.
If you listen to it, it's a tidy 46 minutes, I think it is. But we were on the.
Did we end up including like me spending
on YouTube?
Minutes?
Yeah. On YouTube, people saw 1 hour and 22 minutes of our bullshit. Yes.
Because Simon Alf cut out like in the middle of the podcast. It just went away, and I was waiting for him to come back, and I'm just sitting there by myself, and I'm thinking we're gonna lose the entire recording if I duck out and then we go back. So I just went on for like 20 minutes, just like about quarterbacks in college football. I was just like, hey, we're gonna run them all down.
Fair. I was in Rome actually on holiday with my son, and we have a WhatsApp. Still have a WhatsApp just for like
quit bragging. Quit bragging.
I'm
going to stop you right there.
Go
ahead. Actually, I want to hear about the Rome trip.
We have our WhatsApp just essentially just for like technical stuff about what time we're recording and stuff. And I was obviously in Rome, and so I was an hour ahead than what I normally am here, and I'm 5 hours ahead of you normally, so 6 hours ahead. And I just kept getting messages going, "Where are you? I've lost you. I'm not here." And then just one from Chris going, "I've just been talking for like 20 minutes about college quarterbacks on my own," which I thought was great.
Yeah, it was an odyssey. Okay, but if you listen to our audio version, it's really nice and tidy, really professional, beautiful, great audio.
You sound like Donald Trump. It was really great. It was great.
Yeah, it was great. It was the best recording ever. But if you go to the end of it, okay, and you just go to our predictions, man, we were not only it was almost eerie because both of us predicted the Dolphins would play well in the first half. And we were talking about it off the air before you joined us, Simon. Dolphins look like an honest to good football team in that first half. Right down to the execution of right before the half running that fire drill to get the kickoff. And, of course, it's perfect right down the middle. They get the 3 points right before going to half. And then we talked about how they would lose the game. And both of us absolutely nailed it. We said, think of the most tragic way possible, and it'll be a walk-off field goal. It ended up not being a walk-off field goal, but might as well because there was 5 seconds left. But both of us, and what's funny is that I gave my prediction first, and Chris's prediction was going to be exactly the same.
Yeah, he threw me off completely. I wanted to comfortably be the under on this one, which I did to you in the season, the season prediction. Like I wanted to underbid, and I was like, because Alf was talking about, there were some things that were going to go in Miami's favor in this game with the Chargers offensive line, and it was very different from the Carolina game in that way. And so I'm thinking I'm comfortable. Like I'm like Alf's gonna we're gonna win this one. He's gonna predict them, but I'm gonna predict a heartbreaking loss because that's what I felt like was going to happen. And then he comes out and says, ultimately, I think this is a heartbreaking loss. I think they lose on a heartbreaker or something along those lines. And I'm like, you stole my You
Dream.
stole my prediction, my dream.
That'll be the theme tonight.
You stole my
Dreams theme.
hope. They stole my hope, but yeah.
So I'm gonna get you in on this one, Simon. That first half, man, it looked like something. But let's fast forward to the third quarter, and I looked this up. The yardage 155 for the Chargers, -11 for the Dolphins.
In the third quarter.
In the third quarter, it's the worst quarter of football the Dolphins, and yardage wise, because there's worse ones point wise, yardage wise, in 34 years for the Miami Dolphins. What did
The
you
worst
make of
total quarter, right?
the
Like
worst
any
total quarter? Any quarter.
Any quarter. Wow.
Yeah. Worst total quarter in yardage for the Miami Dolphins in 34 years. What did you make of it, Simon? If you could be brief on what you thought of how they started the game in the first half, and then what you saw in that third quarter, it was just, I don't know, implosion. Like, what do these guys do at halftime? What was that? Your thoughts?
I mean, I thought the first half was okay. It was fine. I mean, there was the interception, and it wasn't the quarterback's fault, but but they led. It kind of a little bit surprisingly, maybe. And then the third quarter just all fell apart. Couldn't get anything moving pretty much for 27 minutes. Actually, the second half, they couldn't really do a lot. So, I think there's a wider issue here that we'll get into, and just in terms of our overall feelings. But yeah, I mean, it looked okay. I don't think we're pulling up any trees in the first half necessarily, but we're moving the ball. And the offense looked pretty decent. I thought that it was overall that the game plan was pretty decent. I liked some of the trickeration, and it didn't work because of just the same old mistakes and the same old people doing the same old bad stuff. The trick play, the double pass, I love that sort of stuff. Unfortunately, it didn't work because 310-pound lineman couldn't block a 208-pound cornerback. So yeah, I mean, it looked nice. The running backs, and I credit Mike McDaniel. He stuck to the run, and HM played really well and highlighted what a really good player he is. But it kind of just all seemed to disappear in the third quarter, and you can't really pinpoint why, but they came back when they needed to at the end, and then, like you said in the podcast, there would be a terrible way of losing, and I don't think anybody could have predicted quite how terrible it was in the end. So, yeah, I mean, I thought overall in that first half they played pretty decently offensively, but they only scored 13 points, so it's hardly like they were, some massive offensive explosion. But they were leading, and they did pretty well. And yeah, where did it all go wrong? Is a rhetorical question.
I think when they got off the bus, or when they assembled the team. How about that? That's when it all went wrong.
When they assembled the team.
Yeah, when they assembled. But I think the wider point is this, right? Is that people have been saying to me all day and all evening, last night and all day on both on Discord and on social media, right, about another kind of rant like the one last week. I don't think it was a rant necessarily, but the whole bingo thing. And I said, look, truth be told, and I think you guys are the same. We've been chatting privately all day, and I don't think I've got it. I mean, and certainly last night. I mean, I was on the train back on the way back from London, where I'd done the radio commentary of the game. The worst. I mean, talk about terrible offenses. Christ. I mean, that Jets offensive performance was probably the worst thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I wanted to pour paint into my eyes. But I don't know that I have it in me to rant, because I was pretty stunned at the loss last night. But also, and this is going to sound awful, but I think I know that you two are pretty much in the same boat. Maybe not quite the same as me, but I was, in a way, pretty blasé about it too. And I think if I was to rant on anything to do with this team, it's actually that sense of indifference that being a fan of this team has now given us over the last couple of years, but certainly right here, right now. I can sit here and say, oh, I was right all along when I said all off season that this team was really bad, or how it's time to move on from the quarterback, because although he wasn't a problem yesterday, clearly, but he also probably isn't part of the solution. And that his post-game comments were ill-judged, ill-informed. I think I know the point he was trying to make. I just think it was the wrong forum. And whilst the clip doing the rounds didn't show him taking ownership for his faults necessarily, in terms of leadership, it kind of showed up exactly the opposite of what he was probably hoping to achieve. And I think there's a bigger issue that we'll get into there in terms of the head coach and his role and responsibility in that. But, when you see today, you've got locker room guys, like stalwart guys, man of the year guys like Andrew Whitworth and Devin McCourty calling you out for washing your dirty laundry, no matter what your intentions were and what games are being played by the coaches, which is actually, I think, the wider point, Chris. It's not like a smart move. And I could riff on like the bad coaching or the missed tackles or the mistakes, but specifically the mistakes that just keep happening over and over and over and over again. And they're the same mistakes over and over again. And the schematic issues, the flawed roster construction that we talked about just then, the fact that we're fielding essentially a completely non-competitive defense, or how that defense has allowed points. And I've got them jotted down here. Let me find them. Has allowed points on 34 of 53 non-kneel down drives this season, which is stunning. How we forced 11. I mean, we forced 11 punts in 6 games. That's it.
To give you a little context,
11.
To give you a little context on that, when the Miami Dolphins played, you remember when they played the Minnesota Vikings in 2022?
Yeah.
Okay, with Teddy Bridgewater and Skylar Thompson at quarterback. The Dolphin defense forced 11 punts in that one game.
I'm pretty sure I saw more than 11 punts by both the Jets and the Broncos yesterday. But also how we've made like 3 more defensive stops and forced punts, but given the teams the ball back because of stupid special teams penalties. There was another one yesterday.
Another one.
Not another one. Oh,
no, what drives me crazy, Simon, and you can speak to this as well. It's been 3 games where they have a chunk play called back because of a holding penalty. And this one was a big one. It was like 3rd and 15, Tua scrambles and hits Waller for a 20-yard gain. Big one.
Yeah. Puts us in the
holding
in scoring position. Holding, yeah.
And now it's 3rd and $1 million.
And I could riff on the fact that we've given up 379 yards rushing in the last 2 weeks to a pair of backup running backs. How we've conceded more than 6 yards per carry on runs between the tackles this season. 6 yards per carry between the tackles. How we've given up 31 runs of 10+ yards this season already, which is mind-blowing. I think it's like 10 more than any other team. How we can't stop the run with heavy personnel on the field. How we can't pressure anybody with 4. How the Chargers' offensive line was missing 3 stars, including their 2 first-round tackles in Slater and Alt. And yet we couldn't, our pressure rate yesterday was the 3rd worst of any team across the NFL last Sunday. How they were starting their 3rd string running back, the number 1 wide receiver was out. And, I could riff on how bad, Jonas Savaniah was, described to us today by Ollie Connolly as a sinkhole, which is kind of what he is. Now, Kenneth Grant might be the very worst of all the Chris Greer draft picks at this point, 6 games in, which is some statement. You look at the number of snaps Benito Jones had yesterday and how you're almost having to put Grant, as we talked about last week, further and further down the line because he's just being bench pressed off the ball. How Chop Robinson has 1 sack this season, how he's not trained on. I could riff on all of that. I could riff on how McDaniel probably needs to go and how Greer absolutely unequivocally has to go, right? How the whole thing just needs to be blown up. We know this, yeah? And how there's probably about 6 players that we'd all keep and the rest we'd probably fire into the sun. But I think genuinely the thing that upsets me most is how little I care, actually. And I don't mean that to upset some people whose experience yesterday was probably one of utter ruination, as mine has been historically, and yours, Chris, has historically been over 10, 20, 30 years of defeats, right? Because believe me, we have all been there. We've been friends for 25 years. We know the pain that we've all been through watching this team, right?
I walked off the field. I walked out of the stadium in 1993 in the AFC Championship game as I watched Thurman Thomas catch screen pass after screen pass, and ever since that day, it's just been one humiliation after the other.
But it's more that this team, right, being a fan of this output,
30 years,
and these people and these players has left me so cold. And has actually killed my joy for this game that I love, that I've adopted as my own for 40 years plus.
I don't like how this team makes me feel. I don't like how they
either.
I watched that game on Sunday, and when Waller caught the touchdown, something came over me, which was like a little bit of joy. Like, man,
I had no joy.
Two great drives. They have the lead. And then I looked at my wife, and I see that my wife is pretty excited about it. And my first instinct was, "There's too much time on the clock.
Yeah,
They're gonna give up a field goal here."
they're
That
the
was my first
thieves.
instinct.
They're the thieves of joy. I mean, as I said, I didn't watch the game live. I watched it as live without knowing the score as soon as I got back from London yesterday. And my partner, who is a Green Bay Packers owner, get that in there, was watching Green Bay Cincinnati. And at the same time, Achan scored, Tucker Kraft scored against the Bengals. And I was weirdly, I found myself thinking, God, I'm more happy for her that the Packers have scored than I am that Achan's just ripped off our kind of biggest explosive of the season, pretty much, because this team are thieves of joy. And some people will say, "Oh, I'm not a real fan for saying that," and I don't care what other people think, right? I don't think you can measure fandom. Who you or I or anybody who are you or I or anybody else to say that you're a bigger fan than me, Alf, or I'm a bigger fan than you, Chris, or we're bigger fans than the listeners, or they're bigger fans than us. It's been 40 plus years for me, right? And now it's such a uniquely joyless experience each and every Sunday, or Thursday night, or Monday night, or Sunday night. And I've flown across the Atlantic many, many times to see the team. I've spent wonderful hours with Chris at his house with his family, and we've been to games. And I spent hundreds of thousands of hours of my time watching or listening to every single game in some capacity since I started as a fan in '84, staying up till 5 a.m. regularly for primetime games. So I don't think you can call my fandom into question, but it has become hopeless and joyless. And what makes it worse, I think, is the fact that, as we've discussed on this show multiple times, as we discussed last week, none of us see Stephen Ross going scorched earth. I mean, do we really, really, truly, and unequivocally believe that Chris Greer will be completely fired, will have nothing more to do with this organization? Do we really believe that even if he's absorbed, or that he won't be absorbed into some sort of senior management front office position where he's still around, he's still, because, and so the joy that can actually come with the rare hope that the NFL provides us all, right, because of the way that it embraces comparative parity, is actually going to be taken away from us because the owner refuses to do what everybody else knows he should do because of some sort of, I don't know, wildly sort of messianic loyalty to these people who are failing him every single day, and in many ways ruining his name and his reputation, right? And so in not doing anything, he just continues to drive this kind of flaming clown car of his own creation into his own grave, because he's 86 years old, right? And he may live another 10, 15 years, but let's be realistic. So whilst I think they're too arrogant, unfortunately, to listen to the views of the fans and of people like us, or to people like Joe Shad and Adam Beasley and Omar Kelly and the people who work this godforsaken team every week, I think deep down the Dolphins management and senior leadership and ownership would be extremely disappointed if they knew the legacy that they created in people like me. But frankly, that's the only legacy that these people will have because of the terrible way that they've run this team. And I just find it, I want my joy back. I do. But I just don't see, Chris, I don't know if you do, I just don't see a pathway to that right now. And that, like, I can genuinely feel myself being emotional about this, but that's what they've stolen from me. And I think you probably feel the same.
Yeah, I think that one thing that you can point to is say it's not just you, is the thing we discussed on a previous podcast last week, which was the TV numbers, which are just absolutely atrocious, right?
Yeah.
They're embarrassing TV numbers for an NFL game. Like, NFL games are supposed to be on a wholly different level than this. And so you are clearly not alone. The Dolphins fans are, I mean, and I saw somebody bring it up, and it is a fair point. Stadium was packed, right? The stadium was packed for the game. They were loud in the fourth quarter. Those third quarter boos turned into cheers in the fourth quarter, like during the the comeback and going down the field twice, scoring and holding them in between. And I think that there's something to that, but at the same time, those TV numbers are telling the story. which is that the fans in the area just don't care anymore. And that's the worst thing. And so they've done that to everybody. They've done that not just to you. They've done that to a lot of people in South Florida. And I think that they would probably struggle to comprehend why. How or why that has happened. And so, looking at that, it does actually make me, because I've openly questioned, you have to have a specific thing in mind if you want to make like an early year firing of some sort, right? I think that there has to be a purpose to it. It can't just be, bloodlust. And but at the same time, this is the entertainment industry ultimately, and you are not entertaining people. You are not entertaining people. You have taken away their joy. You have taken away their hope. You have taken away, everything. And if a firing, if satisfying that lust is all you have left, so be it. So be it. That's what are you losing? What you can say, what are you gaining by making an early season firing? But also, what are you losing? And I think that they're kind of out. Now, as for this game, and we'll get into the post game, where I think that honestly Tua did open up a can of worms, and we'll talk about that. But as for the game, I thought the interesting things about the game is there were some changes in there. Kenneth Grant played less on defense. He and Jordan Phillips kind of shared about the same snap count. There was Benito played some more. For much of the game, they were actually holding the Chargers to stops, like forcing them to field goals, forcing them to punt, things like that. I thought that was an improvement. We saw Ethan Bonner get his snaps at corner instead of Jack Jones. I think more in the second half. I think that may be over. That's an interesting development. I think that they went with Minkah Fitzpatrick as the pretty much full-time nickel.
Yeah.
And when he was matched up with Ladd McConkey, that he disrupted that connection between Justin Herbert and Ladd McConkey. I thought that was an interesting development. So there's things that they can pursue going forward. They had the 3 safety approach out there because Minkah was the nickel now. Dante Trader and Ashton Davis were the other guys. Now, unfortunately, Ashton Davis is a backup. I think that he's backup quality player. I think that Tyrell Dodson, even if he were out there, he's a backup quality player.
I think Melifonwu, like 3 snaps. Did he have Melifonwu?
Yeah, Melifonwu. Well, and that was just because Dante Trader called his own number at one point, got hurt, and said, I need to come out. So Dante Trader and Dante Trader was at the ass end, unfortunately, of that big play to Ladd McConkey at the end there. The one where Jalen Phillips should have clearly gotten Justin Herbert down, but he didn't. Or he should have impacted Herbert more than he did, but he didn't. But Dante Trader, what is he if not a day 3 rookie who is kind of slow, but also one of the best players in the secondary, which is not saying good things about the secondary, right? So, when you're Dante Trader and you're just speed deficient, then you have to come in hot. Yeah. You have to come in hot because, you don't have that much speed in the first place. So when you have to all of a sudden re-angle because something went wrong, you're just going to eat shit. I mean, forgive the language, but that's the way that works when you are speed deficient. I think it's really unfortunate, that the defense is staffed the way it is, because you kept seeing that, Rasul Douglas had a great play at one point, but then, on a screen, it's just a 1-to-1 screen. There's not even a blocker. It's just like, there's spacing. There's a guy getting the ball and go get him down. And he goes and gets him down. They do it a second time, and this time he can't get it down. He can't get him down. But what is Rasul Douglas if not a guy who was still available as the season started? Right? You're not supposed to. You're counting backups to play like starters, and you're counting on starters to play like stars. Like your equations build in all the wrong things. And it just brings to mind, like, the way they formulated this defense, acting like Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips were going to be stars, right? Coming off 2 seasons of hardly playing with all the injuries that they've had, they're going to be star players. And not only are they counting on that, but I don't think, looking at the structure of this defense now that we've gone a little bit further into it this year, and we saw it last year and everything, I don't think this defense is built for edge players to be the stars. Like, I think that this defense needs to be built from the inside out. I think it's up front with the defensive tackles. Case in point, losing Calais Campbell has been a big deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you need strong defensive tackles up front. You need good linebackers. Look in Baltimore, what they had with Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen. I mean, you need good linebackers because there's a lot being put on these linebackers, and you need good safeties. And
I don't blame the linebackers either. The more I look at it, the more I think it's really hard to do your job when there's no gap control in front of you.
Yeah, but I think that the linebackers are part of that run fit. Like KJ, I don't think KJ played particularly well. I know that he got some tackles, and I know people were like, oh, look at this. I'm like, yeah, we're still allowing a backup running back to, get 6 yards a carry against us. I just think that this is a extremely poor managed personnel on defense. It's got the talent in the wrong places, and the talent that they do have is not in place to actually be that talented this year in the first place, because we know, like Jalen Phillips, he might be great in the future. He's not right now, right? He's not right now. He got to victimize maybe the worst offensive lineman playing football yesterday, which is Bobby Hart, right? But, he's not great right now, Jalen Phillips is, because he's coming off of 2 very serious injuries, right? Very serious. And what do they always say with a guy like that? If he comes back at all, it's the second year after that big surgery, right? The second year after that big injury. That's when they get the explosiveness back. That's when they get the confidence back. He's not there yet, but the equations, when they wrote all this out, who's going to play where and what, and stuff like that, they counted on those edge players being star players, right? And I don't think this is the defense for it, and I don't think that those were the players for it. And that's what I mean when I say, because a lot of people keep saying, with the talent that they have with Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb and Minkah Fitzpatrick and stuff like that, Anthony Weaver should be able to do a lot better than what it, maybe he should. Maybe he should and could. I'm not excusing him, right, from all of this. But I think that argument is badly founded in the first place, because the star players that you have in place aren't in place to play like stars this year, not in place to play like stars in this defense, certainly not when they're not getting the help from the other positions they need to get help from in order to collect and produce, collect those opportunities and produce like stars do. It's just a very, very wrong-headed approach on the defensive side. Yeah. And it's clear that the defense is the millstone hanging around this team's neck.
I will say that. Yeah, I agree. I will say in the linebackers' defense, and certainly in Jordan Brooks' defense, right?
Right.
It's really hard to kind of scrape and fill your gaps if guys are just constantly in your lap. Do you know what I mean? I think it's kind of unfair that they try and, because they play that kind of, I don't know what's the term for it, sort of see it, find it football at the second level, right? And it's kind of that gap and a half stuff where you just kind of figure it out, fill the hole. And I just think for guys like Jordan Brooks, it's very hard to work towards a guy whilst, you're getting just guys climbing to you and picking you off every time because the guys in front of you just can't do their job. And I think that's, I'm not trying to remove blame from them, because they are, I think Brooks is playing well, but it's not ideal when, you've already got 25 more tackles than everybody else on the team. But I do think it's like, I think even if you had Fred Warner and, another great, Fred Warner and the kid at Green Bay, the second year kid from Texas A&M, you have those two there, for example. It's still really hard when you just got guards just picking you off every single snap because nobody up front.
Edger and something.
Yeah,
Cooper.
Yeah, Cooper.
Yeah.
When electric fast and instinctive. When you got those two guys, even then I think it's hard when you just got guys in your lap every single snap, just like, and you're not getting a clean run to even fill your gap because you're just being picked off because nobody up front can block anybody.
And then you have the safeties, because look on the Vidal long run, he had two of them. The second one,
Which one?
It's a mess that I have to explain which one. Right, KJ Britt is reading two gaps there. He's reading the B gap. He's reading the outside. Right, and you see that he is making a beeline for the sideline. And who comes flying out of nowhere to block him? Not a Charger, not Keenan Allen, Ashton Davis. Because Ashton Davis just stumbles his way somehow into the B gap to get himself blocked and to get KJ Britt blocked, and boom, he's gone. And Minkah Fitzpatrick has to save a touchdown. So it's an absolute joke.
But it's the thing. The chain is only as strong as its weakest link. You're right, Simon. You're absolutely right. If you put Fred Warner in there, Edgerrin Cooper,
Ashton Davis can block him too.
Then then they're still going to be left out there hanging out to dry on a lot.
It was really interesting yesterday watching the Broncos and doing the Broncos game, right? Because whilst their center isn't amazing, Luke Wattenberg, right? They've got two of the best currently on, in terms of sacks given up and pressures, but also Garrett Bowles is playing at an all-pro level, but McGlinchey's playing well as well. Ben Powers has had a really good start to the season, and Quinn Miners is playing really well as well. Okay, but Ben Powers has gone on to injured reserve, and yesterday they literally rotated through Matt Peart and a guy whose name I can't remember. And the offensive line really struggled against a Jets defense who historically bad. The first team since stats began in 1933 not to have a turnover in their first 5 games. Worst in the league for missed tackles, worst in the league for yards after the catch. And I think they'd only had 10 sacks all season. Will McDonald had 2.5. And yesterday the defensive line was outstanding. And it was because, this is what happens when a good offensive lineman gets hurt and you have to replace him with, as we know and as we've discussed, there's not that many great starting linemen in the league. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I was looking at the Colts today, and you look at how good that interior 3 has been, with Quentin Nelson and then Tanner Bortolini and the kid, Matt Goncalves, who was the tackle at Pitt, who's now the right guard. The 3 of them are just, watching them in isolation to see what they're doing for Jonathan Taylor is just stunning because, Nelson is, a future Hall of Famer. And the other 2 have just come in, played together, and are just so athletic to the second level. And you think, that's great if you can keep all 5 healthy. But, when you're having to bring in a weak link or you've already got a weak link, and let's make no bones about Savaniah, for example, when you're faced with the issue that we're faced with, it's really hard to kind of be competent in any aspect of your game when you're just trying to, cover up. Like you look at the stuff Patrick Paul's having to do to cover up for the guy next to him because the guy next to him just can't play. And yet Patrick Paul's still playing at a really good level, and a level that I don't think any of us thought he was going to be playing at. And I just think for Miami, it goes back to the thing that we said right at the top, that you said right at the top, Chris. It's the way it's all been put together, and it's just been so poorly constructed and so poorly thought out. And yet, look, here we are. We're 1-5, and our hope has pretty much evaporated. And the question is now, where do we go from here? I suppose, and that's the,
we go to break is where we go from here.
Well, yeah. That's where we get our joy. We get our joy.
That's
from
right.
Break.
Yeah. So we're gonna go to break, and when we come back,
advertising.
We're gonna talk about press conferences, and we're gonna talk about soirees and who Stephen Ross actually listens to. But first, these words. And we are back. If you're watching us on YouTube, you just noticed that nothing happened. But if you listen to us on audio, you just got some of our sponsors to speak to you, including Thompson Cigar. And we thank them again. They're going to be with us for the duration of this season, not the duration of time. Although that would be nice.
It might be.
Yeah, right. Let's talk about this.
Also, these advertisers as well, because my God, imagine the money they're going to make when we actually field a good team.
Right?
Good Lord, yeah.
With the most listened to Dolphins podcast as it is, and the team's shit. Imagine what it's going to be like when the team's good. Everybody in the world's going to be smoking a Thompson cigar. Like Steve Ross is going to have like Thompson cigars like in his mouth, like Thompson, wow. Amazing. Mate, these Thompson cigars lads, like, or ladies even, they're going to be lapping it up when we're good. Wow.
Yeah, 2046 is going to be an awesome year, you know?
For Thompson cigars, that's going to be an awesome year.
Yeah.
Mr. Thompson. Woo.
I'm just you can't do that motion again with Steve.
It's on YouTube. Anyway. So we had enough about this game. We all saw it. That last play, Jalen Phillips falling off of Herbert, Dante Trader out in no man's land, and we saw what happened. Dicker the kicker, which is still the best name in football, and maybe the best kicker in football, kicks it through, and it's a wrap, right? But then they go to the press conference and the quarterback, and look,
and somehow make it worse.
Right?
How is it possible to make it worse?
Oh, he'll try. I'll explain. I love Tua. Okay, I've said it from day one. I think
we all do. I think that's really important to make that point.
I think he's been I think he's been a really good quarterback for this team. I have said that I would replace him, but I would have him play next year because I'm just not going to destroy myself or the prospective rookie quarterback with this roster. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I want to have at least a ready-made roster for the rookie when he takes over in 2027. So I really like Tua, and I really do believe he's the second best quarterback in franchise history. I think he's a really good quarterback. But he has always struck me as a do too much guy. And I think he's taken it upon himself to try to, I don't know what he's trying to do. I think Channing Crowder, and I like Channing Crowder because I like the style. He's entertaining. But he kind of he spoke about it. Mm-hmm. He's like, why are we having meetings about talking about the meeting that we just had? And then what? We're going to talk about how we're going to conduct our next meeting. After a while, it gets old and nobody's listening. I think Tua is one of these guys that is just going to try too hard to try to lead behind the scenes and try to get everybody has to be in place. Everybody has to be listening to this. And no, we got to execute this perfectly. And I think it falls on deaf ears. And I think he, I don't know if he was being intentional. Maybe he was, or maybe he was just riffing because he's a guy who tends to riff. But my God, he started a firestorm. And personally, I thought he threw the coaches under the bus because he mentioned the players, but he started the whole riff talking about leadership. And everybody's like, oh, well, wait a minute. Don't you have a C on your chest? I don't think he sees it that way. I think he sees it as, yeah, I'm a captain, but the leaders are the coaches. So what did you make of the comments, Simon? First of all, I don't think, personally, I was like, burn the whole goddamn thing down. So I don't care, who you offend on this team because it's not worth saving anybody. But yeah. If you're on the team with him, he's kind of throwing you under the bus, but I took it to mean, and I think Chris agrees with me, I don't know if you do, that he was throwing the coaches under the bus with his comments. Your thoughts on
I thought it was ill-timed. I just don't think it was necessary. And I think that's become clear from people who've been in locker rooms. We've not been in locker rooms. I thought what Devin McCourty had to say on Football Night in America was really kind of apposite in terms of how he said, look, if you're going to do it properly and call out people by name, because realistically, you're not doing anything and you're going to go back into that locker room and just be a laughing stock. If you're going to call people out by name, then you need to be prepared for the fact that people will come for you physically. And as McCourty said, that's what happens in the locker room, and he made it pretty clear that had happened on a number of occasions, or at least one occasion in New England where there'd been physical confrontation because of something that was said. I don't think Tua meant it. What do I think? I don't think he meant it to sound the way he did. And I think that the clip is the clip, right? He said what he said. I do think that when you watch the entire, and it was a back and forth with Omar Kelly. I think when you watch the entirety of the back and forth, it does have a little bit of extra context in it because he does point the finger at himself and he says, I am one of the people that needs to be better. Like that we lost the game in part because of things I did wrong. Now that obviously doesn't make good. That is not excusing what came next. But he did. People are saying, "Well, you're the leader. You should be. When are you going to put your hand up and say I had 3 interceptions and yada yada yada?" And I think he did do that. But I just think what he said was just not the right place, not the right time. And I think the backlash has just not been worth it. And I understand probably where he was coming from. And I think there's a far bigger issue that Chris will get into in a sec, I think, in terms of the coaches. And we've talked about it, that this kind of chasm that seems to have opened up. But I just think it was just a bit stupid to say. And I think probably, whether it was Brett or the press guys would have just been stood there with their kind of fists in their mouth, just saying, "Oh God, well, stop talking, stop," because it's just the sort of PR that you just don't want to have to hoover up at, after the end of a defeat like that.
Yeah, the more that goes on, the more I think that there's onion layers here, and this is a deeper problem. I think that there may be a burgeoning Cold War happening between the quarterback and the head coach at this point. And I couldn't blame Tua. Like, first off, we know that from context last year, we know that last year didn't end well. No. In terms of when Tua had to be out for those couple of weeks, and those last couple of weeks, and he certainly didn't look happy on that sideline against Cleveland in the last game. I think that, and then the way the whole offseason played out, like, there's context here. But what I think, so I think, speaking of Channing Crowder, I thought he had a great reaction to this. Like, you're not going to win anybody in that locker room by snitching on them, right? By going out there and talking about, people being late and, not even showing up to the meetings and stuff like that. But I also think that the details are important, and the details are where things really get hairy, because this is not the infamous players only meeting, where you get up there and somebody, Ryan Fitzpatrick said that the only players only meetings that he's been part of, it seemed like somebody got up to talk specifically because they wanted a report to come out the next day about what they got up in front of the players at the players only meeting and said, like, it's performative. It's a very performative thing. This is not what they're talking about. The details of what they're talking about is more insidious, in my opinion, because these are extracurricular film study sessions. These are guys that are trying to, on their own time, take it upon themselves, and it's not everybody together, it's units. And when they talk, it's actually ironic that this busted wide open after the game, because the week leading up to the game, this is when Kenneth Grant and others revealed that these individual player-led film sessions that they're having, these extracurriculars, they've started to invite some coaches to them. The DL coach is attending these now. The DB coach is attending the DB unit when they do this. These are extracurricular film study sessions. So the question I have, and that Channing Crowder said at the end of that clip, is like, okay, Channing described it very well. You get in there at X time in the morning. It's ass early in the morning, right? First thing you do is go to meetings. Second thing you do is go to meetings. Then you have more meetings. Then you see about practice, and you go to practice, and then you have lunch, and then you have more meetings. And then so he's like, so Channing is kind of defending the players that, like, all we do is meet for like 6 or 7 hours a day. Why do we need more meetings? Like, and then he came around to it, and you have to start thinking about it. Wait a minute. Why do they need more meetings? Right? Like, what aren't they getting during their film sessions with the coaches that are making the players? And I'm not just talking about Tua, because I don't think he's the only one that's doing this. I think this is multiple units doing these extracurriculars. And Mike McDaniel even said the time frames. He said it's like Thursday morning, or some other time slots today that he talked about. Like, why do they feel like they have to do this without the coaches and do this on their own? What aren't they getting from their coach meetings and their film sessions? The actual ones, the ones that are actually, supposed to be, resulting in them winning games. Like, that is a big concern. That is a big neon sign that's saying that these players are not feeling like they're getting enough during all that to where they have to do extra. And to me, that is a big warning sign. And the other thing is Mike McDaniel's reaction, which is not getting any press. And I found it to be alarming, which was when he was asked about it last night, he basically said, and the thing is, he actually reiterated it today. I thought he walked it back, but I watched it. No, he reiterated it again today. Not my monkey, not my circus, essentially was his response in his own word salady way. Like, which is, he's asked about this thing, to a sudden guys are showing up late or, stuff like that. Like, what's going on with that? And, he basically iterated, well, they've done everything that we've asked as coaches. So, if they're not going to your meetings, and that's your problem, you handle it, and I thought that was such a terrible answer for a head coach, because ultimately the buck stops with you. You are responsible for it all. You are responsible for every bit of getting ready to play games on Sunday. And I thought that was bad enough, but he somehow made it worse today. Mike McDaniel did, because in his press conference today, where he went ahead and clarified, which, by the way, Aaron Brewer and Patrick Paul did the exact right thing today. They were asked about this, and what did they say? I'm not going to comment on that. We keep that in house.
By the way, I don't think that's random, because I
don't think that's random. You're right.
I watch all of these. I watch them all. I watch all of these press conferences, and just to make sure I don't miss anything, so that way when we do the podcast, I could speak from from experience. Hey, I remember when Aaron Brewer said this or Patrick Paul said that. They put up Patrick Paul, and for those of us that have been to camp, know Patrick Paul and Aaron Brewer. Aaron Brewer is probably the best human being on the team and a real leader, along with Jordan Brooks. But on the offense, Aaron Brewer is a guy that you go to, and he will engage with everybody in the media. And Patrick Paul was kind of a camp star. Why? Because he was revealing. And he talked about, I needed to become a better player, and I knew that the way that I could become a better player was work on my body. And then the guy made a transformation.
Did he just?
Did he ever?
It was a complete body transformation. Okay.
Total success story.
So that they put those two guys up at the podium and they both are in lockstep with what they say. I think it means something. But
do you think Mike McDaniel was going to say, hey guys, we're going to keep that in house and then not talk about it? Hell no. No. He went on loquaciously about exactly, the misstep that Tua made, and Tua knows that he shouldn't have done that, and going through it and going, but that's his style. He talks too much, right? He talks too much. He is going to call out players by name sometimes. He's going to, in public, in the press. He's done it, countless times. He's going to call out assistant coaches by accident, kind of indirectly. It's a very passive aggressive thing. But Mike McDaniel is not going to do that. Mike McDaniel did not handle it that way. But what he did show today in that press conference was absolute, utter disdain and disrespect for those meetings, the value of those meetings. Several times during the press conference, he iterated that those meetings and whatever happens at those meetings, and whether a guy's late at them or whether he doesn't show up at all, they have absolutely nothing to do with winning on Sunday. Why are the players doing it then if they don't think that they need it to help them on Sunday and to help them win on Sunday? This is multiple players at all these different positions doing these unit meetings on their own extracurricular time, deciding to do this. And here's the head coach saying that has nothing to do with anything. There's no value in it whatsoever. That's not why we win or don't win on Sunday. It was massive disrespect in my eyes to say that about what those players are doing. Those players are taking their extra time to do more film session, to do more film study, to try and win. And here's Mike McDaniel saying whatever happens at those things has nothing to do with winning. What we do in our coach meetings, that's what matters toward winning. That's all that matters.
But have you noticed
stuff that doesn't?
have you noticed that Mike McDaniel's tone changed this year? Do you remember in training camp when Tyreek Hill went up there at the podium right after practice, and he said, Ollie Gordon, yeah, and he was waxing poetic, like, I love Ollie Gordon. He's a big guy. He should be the new, goal line back, and we got to stop running Achan up the middle on 3rd and 1. And Mike McDaniel was asked about that, and he goes, "Did you tell Tyreek that to participate in our install today? Because if you watched our install, we ran 5 3rd and 1 plays, and they were all with Ollie Gordon, and at the time Alexander Madison. So tell Tyreek next time to pay attention when we're in practice." And I heard that, and everybody did the thing, the giggle, like, ha 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 ha. And I'm like, wait a minute, I don't think everybody understood what he just said. Like, he basically just dressed down Tyreek Hill at the podium.
In public, at the podium.
Basically saying maybe he should have participated in the install and paid attention to what we were doing.
And you wonder why you have players taking their cues. You wonder why you have Tua, thinking that he's saying something that probably in his head has sounded better. Like saying something that ends up airing dirty laundry. Why do you think you end up with Kenneth Grant? You pointed it out on a podcast. Remember Kenneth Grant, is asked something about, his play, and he mentions Jordan Phillips being out of place on a play, right?
Yeah.
Why do you think you've got this? They're taking their cues from the top. He's establishing a culture of very public calling out, and it's turning in. And of course, when you get in a challenging environment, very predictably, it's turning into finger pointing. And it's turning into the ugliness, the ugly side of that. The public accountability approach can conceivably go okay if it's universal. Like there's nobody that's better than anybody. Like, we're just gonna call it out because we're all accountable. Like maybe that can work, but not in a challenging environment when you're losing. And not in an environment where you have different types of people, and some of them are like, I'm not going to take too kindly to that shit, and I think that we've already suffered because of that. And I just wish that there was more, Sports Center and Good Morning Football and stuff like that talking about what it means that the head coach just essentially said that all of that extra work that you guys are doing, all that extra film sesh that you guys are doing is bullshit. It's bullshit. That's what he said today.
Yeah,
he said
essentially.
He said it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I spoke to a player once, and I asked him specifically because he was part of a notorious dumpster fire down here, so you can guess who it was. And I asked him, what happens in a dumpster fire and how do you survive that? Like, how do you go back to play when you really don't have a chance? And he goes, it's very simple. You DYJ, you do your job. So what you do is you put your head down and you got to be ready to say, look, we were 5 and at the time, 5 and 11 was 16 games, but we were 5 and 12. But I was really more like 10 and 7, 11 and 6, I did my job, I think you know who I'm talking about, Chris. And this play, and I heard that, and I'm like, that makes sense. Like, just do your job, and that's how you get yourself out of the dumpster fire, and you become a little bit, kind of competent. So I want to end here because we've already gone pretty long. I want to end here. Who is Stephen Ross listening to? Because you see him come down to the field, and my God, he came down to the field ready to, smile it up, and who knows? Maybe he was going to go shake Harbaugh's hand, like, "Hey, got you, buddy." No, you know what I mean?
He was going to celebrate. He was down on field level to celebrate. He saw that comeback touchdown, and he was down there ready, and then he had to witness.
So I'm thinking, who is he listening to? Because I'm getting this feel, because you could just see it. You could see it. Like today, a couple of players came out and said, they got to fire Mike McDaniel. Like, Mike McDaniel has to go. There was a couple of Chris Greers, and let's face it, most in the national media don't know who the hell Chris Greer is. Okay. All they know is Mike McDaniel, Tua Tagovailoa, right? So Tua caught a little bit of flack from the usual suspects, but Mike McDaniel had an unusual amount of people defending him, and it was all his buddies in the media. And then you go and you see all these receptions that they do for Monday Night Football, because all the ESPN people are there for Monday Night Football, and they're all there, and they're all with Stephen Ross. Is he listening to these people? Not to call out people by name, but yeah, Peter Schrager, Tom Pelissaro. Is he listening to all these people for advice? Who has his ear? Because I don't know why I have this feeling that Mike McDaniel's going to survive this. Because he just seems way too confident in all his proclamations.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I'll start with you, Simon. What do you make of this? Who is Stephen Ross listening to?
I thought the Ian Rappaport thing where he said that he completely believes in McDaniel and he wants to make it work. I thought that was really eye-opening today, I've got to say. Who's he listening to? Tom Garfinkel, obviously, vice chairman, president, CEO. I mean, he's the guy that was stood on the sideline ready to lap up the celebration with Steve Ross yesterday, and the looks on their faces as Herbert escaped and hit McConkey were almost a kind of microcosm of this entire era. I think Marino, I think Mark Higgins, who's the former Jets executive, who's now the kind of co-founder of Ross's RSE Ventures and the special advisor to him. I think that Bruce Beal, and then I think there's some other groups, some other people. There's other people involved with the Dolphins, obviously, who he listens to in terms of the front office-y people. But I think that the guys that I've mentioned, the names that I mentioned, are the people that he really pays all that attention to. And really, I don't know whether media guys, I mean, I certainly know our media guys generally say that he's not spoken for many years. I mean, I know one of our media guys who believes that, who says that he has a relationship with him, and I don't doubt that. But yeah, I think it's Garfinkel, I think it's Marino, I think it's Beal. And I think it's Higgins. They're the guys that Chris, I believe, are talking to him.
Chris,
what I've heard is that it's a rotation. It's basically who is Steve running this year. That's the question. Because in the past, it has been different guys. It's been Mike Tannenbaum. Listening to Mike Tannenbaum, which results in Mike Tannenbaum's being hired here. And that weirdness where he was hired originally as an executive, and then it was more than that, or a consultant, and then it was more than that.
Who was the other consultant
specific
they
names.
had?
Carl.
The guy from Chiefs.
The Chiefs
Peterson.
guy.
Carl Peterson.
Yeah, the
Carl
guy who farted
Peterson,
on camera.
that's exactly who it was.
The guy who farted on camera on Hard Knocks. Yeah.
Which was great. Admit it. It was great.
That's a great. You should look that up. That's a great clip.
I posted. Yes, I'm gonna post it. I'm gonna post it on OnlyFans. By the way, if you want to see that, that clip on OnlyFans, go to discord.gg/OnlyFans. You become a member there, all access for $4.99 a month. I put a link in every single one of our descriptions. But go ahead.
It's perfect for this season. But yeah. So I think it's just like whoever it is this year, and I've heard some names that I'm not allowed to say on air, but about randos that you wouldn't think that, but he is, he has a relationship there and listens to. In the past it's been Peyton Manning, in the past it's been, it really is just this weird rotation with him. Now the people, I think Simon already named the people that are just kind of permanently installed around him. But there are some family considerations there too. Jeremy Fowler recently mentioned, getting his sons more involved. I know one of those is a son-in-law, not a son. And worked with him. The two of them worked together on Relevant, the business venture where they're bringing all those soccer games to the United States. That's a very big, and in other descriptions, that son-in-law has been straight up called the guy that oversees Steve Ross's sports portfolio, including the Miami Dolphins. So I think that's something that you look out for. But speaking of like Pelissaro and stuff like that, I think that's the context. That's also the context behind this burgeoning Cold War between Tua Tagovailoa and Mike McDaniel, because you see guys that are conspicuously. We're talking about the source guys. These are the source media. These are the ones I'm hearing from this, I'm hearing from that, that sort of thing. There's different kinds of media. The source guys are coming out with these full-throated, poor Mike McDaniel. He's got a game plan around a quarterback who can't get hit. He's got a game plan around a quarterback who has all these physical limitations. Tom Pelissero did it, and he did the straight up like Inglorious Bastards like 3 thing, right? Like where he was like he was talking about, he's like, oh, and I know that the linebacker of the other team, said that, we saw it on film, but they don't really run that play that often. I'm like, Tom Pelissero, you have no idea how often they run that play. I know you wouldn't even be able to tell that concept on film if somebody pointed it to you. I'm sorry. But like, so there's these kinds of these go-betweens, that he has, that are bailing, shooting, in the literal words of Jeremy Fowler, who said it straight, I'll shoot him a little bail here. These guys are shooting him bail. And what are they doing when they do that? They're talking about poor Mike McDaniel having to deal with Tua Tagovailoa. So that's context behind this Tua and McDaniel, feud that I think is happening behind the scenes. And just today, Josina Anderson said that there's 5, situations out there where people and league insiders expect a head coach change. She mentioned that one of them, a very prominent player or a star player, is in ownership's ear about. Do you think I would be surprised at all if Tua Tagovailoa is in Steve Ross's ear about Mike McDaniel and Tua's frustrations about the locker room culture, which he was on Nick Saban teams. He knows what it's supposed to look like in terms of the hard work and the professionalism and stuff like that. I think he's struggling with the fact that it's not, and that he doesn't feel like Mike McDaniel is giving him, is helping to establish that. So I think that this is a real thing. This is going to get probably worse as the season goes on, depending on whether they win more or not, and stuff like that. And I think that it is a shame, because not too long ago, remember, Tua Tagovailoa came to the press conference and he revealed that Mike McDaniel was the guy that put his thumb on the scale and made sure that he got the contract. Said it outright to the press. Said that Mike, I heard through the grapevine, I think he said, that Mike McDaniel was the one, stepped in and made sure that I got that contract. We went from that to, I think that these guys are, it's not as bad as it was with Brian Flores, because I think Flores is just more combative and but I think that Mike McDaniel is very passive aggressive
and political.
And so, and political. So I think that there is something happening there.
Yeah, absolutely. That reminded me of one thing, Chris, and here's the thing, and here's where it's a little bit different. Do you remember and this is a while back, man. This is 2012 when Dwayne Wade and Eric Spoelstra almost went to full-on fist fight on the sideline of a second round playoff series. Remember?
Yeah, I recall the
Pacers?
stories about it. I don't recall watching it live, but yeah.
And it was all over. Essentially, I think Spoelstra called him a pussy on the sideline, and Dwayne Wade went to speak to Tom Crean, who used to be his coach at Marquette. And Tom Crean, I think Dwayne Wade has revealed some of this later, revealed that Tom Crean told him, you were in the wrong. You blew up on the sideline when he's trying to get your attention on a play because you were playing poorly, and you need to put your head down and be a leader for the team, even though what happened publicly is now out there forever because everybody saw you being restrained from going after your coach. Here's the thing. If it's going public like this, well, public, I mean inside the building, meaning everybody in the building, because obviously if there's a civil war going on between the coach and the quarterback, everybody in that building knows, right?
Yeah.
So if it's going public, as in public inside that building, Mike McDaniel doesn't have the clout for that Eric Spoelstra has. And Mike McDaniel is not guaranteed the money that Tua is guaranteed in 26. So how does he survive this?
I don't think anybody survives, but the problem is that when they do clean house, it's going to be like Donna Ponte and Jason Garrett, and everybody in the entire Miami audience that's listening to this podcast will slit their own throats, when they hear that.
Yeah. All right. We're not going to slit our own throats, but we will talk about, good God, Dylan Gabriel. There'll be 2 left-handed Hawaiian quarterbacks on Sunday. I'm rooting for Shadur Sanders. Like, that'd be kind of fun, right? Shadur Sanders off the bench. Let's watch Shadur Sanders in his debut against the Dolphins.
Let's watch some Monday Night Football.
Yeah. All right. We're going to leave it right there. On Thursday, we will talk about this game. But till then.
See you guys.
Bye, guys.